Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we're continuing our series we're doing in association with my friends at the DLD conference, who are celebrating their 20th year anniversary in Munich next year in 2025. Over this series we've been talking to distinguished DLD alumni about their sense of what the last 20 years has been like, both in historical terms and personally. And today we're talking with Bill Gross, the founder of Idealab, who I think has attended DLD more than 15 times, so one of its most loyal friends and attendees. And as always in this series, I began by asking Bill Gross what he remembers about January 2005.
Beginning of 2005, I was really optimistic about the way the world was heading. I had just seen Inconvenient Truth. I was really excited about doing great things to make a positive impact on climate. I was starting companies in the climate space. We had just come off of the dot-com crash, so I really felt like investing both in new internet and new digital companies, but also in the physical world to make a big difference and positive impact on the world. I was really, really excited about that at that moment.
Bill, for many people, 2005 and the 21st century represents the beginning, but for you, in some ways, it also marks the closing of something. You were an enormously influential figure in the Web 1 revolution. You were around in the 90s, you were one of the founding figures in the dot-com boom, and in some ways, I guess, the bust. Would it be fair to say that you invented the Web 1 business model?
I don't know if we invented it, but we did invent this idea of doing lots of experimentation with new business models in Web 1.0. When we first started Idealab, it actually was started because I had 12 different ideas for internet companies because the browser had taken off. And rather than pick just one, I decided to do all 12. So it was even the idea of an incubator or a startup studio where you could form multiple companies under one roof, test and learn from each of them, and put all those learnings into making each company better and better. And it led to a whole bunch of explosion of innovation. Actually, every disruptive technology, big disruption like a meteor striking the Earth, leads to a whole bunch of Cambrian explosion of opportunity. And we're seeing that now with AI, but we saw that back then with the browser. The browser just opened things up so you could talk to the whole planet. So there were so many new things to be invented, and it was a really exciting time. I loved the role that we played in that.
The term Web 1.0 or Web 1 only exists now, post Web 2 and Web 3. At the time, it's perhaps hard to look back at now, so many years have elapsed, Bill, but at the time, did you recognize, and you and your fellow pioneers of the digital revolution, did you recognize that this was just the beginning and everything was inevitably going to change dramatically?
I really did feel that. I'll tell you the exact instance that led to creating Idealab, but to all those companies. It was whenever the cost of something approaches zero, there's a big disruptive change. And with the internet, the cost of distribution approached zero. And the cost of distribution in the sense of I could reach a customer somewhere on the planet for almost no dollars. My previous business, Knowledge Adventure, we made educational software products, and it was packaged goods products that you had to ship in the stores. So we had to get distributors and trucks and wholesalers and retailers and Egghead Software and CompUSA and Walmart and Target to carry our products. So the cost of distribution was large. And the bottleneck between you and your customer was very large. Just to even talk to your customer was very difficult. You had to beg people to turn in their registration cards and their products. Remember those cards you would send in to register your product? Nobody did that. Maybe 1 or 2% of the people did that. So now there was this new medium where you could talk to every single customer, full one-to-one. So I saw that was going to be incredible. That was going to change everything. At least all the things that I'd worked on in the past that had all those bottlenecks, those were removed. But then I also saw it was going to get faster, and it was going to get smaller. And even as early as 1997, 1998, when the first RIM pagers came out, they were called RIM pagers before they were called BlackBerry pagers. The first RIM pagers came out, Research in Motion. When you could receive a text string in your pocket and reply to it with text, I saw that as the forerunner of the mobile revolution. It took 10 more years for that really to happen with the iPhone coming out. But I saw people having supercomputers in their pockets inevitably, even as early as the late 90s.
Did you also recognize at the time some of the costs? It's all very well talking about the price of distribution going down to zero, but in some ways there were costs. You and I are both music lovers. I had a startup in the 90s called Audio Cafe. You've always been a high-end audiophile, always interested in high-quality sound. That was, of course, the age of the MP3 revolution, which in many ways represents a decline in the quality of sound. But it wasn't just MP3s, it was a lot of other things. Were you in any way worried in the 90s, Phil, about some of the consequences of this digital revolution?
I think I was most worried at the time when I saw Napster arise with the MP3 revolution at the end of the 90s, that there would be massive theft of intellectual property.
Yeah, sorry to jump in here, talking about the price of something going down to zero.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with the internet, the cost of distribution went down to zero. With the cloud, the cost of storage went down to zero. With AI, the cost of knowledge creation is going down to zero. Definitely, it impacts industries. These are disruptive moments. But I really feel that with the Napster revolution, of course, they were sued. Music companies got together. Steve Jobs came up with a new business model. Spotify came up with a new business model. I believe that music is sustainable. It has changed. It has morphed. There still are revenues that flow back to musicians. It comes in a different form. It comes in a different method of accounting. It also comes a lot from traveling tours. But I definitely feel that I didn't foresee how much disruption there really was going to be as these multiple costs decline to zero.
But would it be fair to say that the Web 2 revolution, Web 2.0, a term invented, of course, by Tim Riley, which began to seem real and acquire sort of widespread acceptance in around 2005, represents a time when the creativity or the distribution of creativity went down to zero?
Oh, really? I think the creativity stayed strong. I don't have that same.
I don't mean it in that sense. I don't mean it critically. I mean that anyone now could use any of the platforms to distribute their writing, their music, their video.
I feel that that was a net positive. I feel that we heard more voices. We heard more long-tail voices when that cost of distribution, the cost of creativity went down. I think we saw an explosion of creativity. So I feel we're still seeing that today. Now it's being disrupted by AI for many challenging reasons. But I definitely feel that I don't view that as a period of reduction in creativity.
No, maybe my question was misinterpreted. I didn't mean it in that sense. I mean, you define each revolution in terms of something, the price of something going down to zero. What was Web 2.0 about then?
Yeah, so for Web 2.0, I feel the revolution was more about the new interface things you could do for increased interactivity, as opposed to having static web pages that updated like turning the page of a book. You now had dynamic web pages. You had new functionality that wasn't possible before that made the web more like applications of the past. That, I think, led to an explosion of new opportunity because now you weren't limited to just turning pages in a book like hypertext might be, and it was much, much greater than that. So I feel that that was a turning point that led to the applications we use today. I think that led to the expectation that everything would work like an app as opposed to like a static web page.
You're the chairman now and the founder of Idealab. When was it founded then?
We founded in 1996, and it was actually, the firing shot for me was the Netscape IPO in the summer of 1995. It actually happened on my birthday in 1995. And Netscape at that time was one of this wild, high-flying public offerings, but it had 30 million users, only 30 million. Think about how silly that sounds today. There's 4 billion people connected today, but 30 million users. But now there were 30 million people you could talk to in a one-to-one conversation. So from August of that year when Netscape went public to January of 1996 when I started Idealab, I just was filled with ideas of new opportunities, new things that should be redone on the internet. The yellow pages need to be redone. E-commerce needs to be done. Ticketing needs to be redone. All these things that were broken and inefficient should be redone with this new medium. And that's what I said led to, I put down these 12 ideas on a piece of paper and I was trying to figure out which one to do. And that's when I had this novel twist. Let's start all 12 of them. Let me find a way to seed the capital into 12 at once, find CEOs for each of them, apply my startup experience to all of them and help them grow. But it really led to a lot of learning because doing multiple companies under one roof, right here in this building, we've been in the same location for 28 years, led to a lot of shared knowledge and experiences. It was akin to what I tried to organize it a little bit like my experience in college, where I was in a dorm and I was around upperclassmen, when I was a freshman, upperclassmen, seniors even, and you looked up to the seniors because they were so wise and older. I wanted companies in the building that would be wise and older, right next to young startups where they could all share learning and have a shared experience to move more quickly and more efficiently.
You became a kind of a pin-up for incubation, ideas incubation, in the same way as Mark Andreessen, you mentioned, Netscape became the pin-up the boy genius engineer. What was that like for you to acquire such instant fame?
Well, I really felt that entrepreneurship is a great way to unlock human capital. And I was really trying to be a proponent of more people taking entrepreneurial risk. I think that by showing that you could do it on your own, or you could do it in the safety of a startup studio, might lead more people to take a chance at the entrepreneurial experience. Many people copied this business model, and I wanted people to copy this. This was sort of open source to the world. We tried to share with everybody who asked, how do you do it? Not that we knew everything, but that we were learning along the way. Just because I feel this is such a great way to tackle problems in the world. If you see a problem in the world that technology can solve, I wanted to show that a startup was a very viable way to do it. You can do it with laws, you can make laws, you can do it with passion and with evangelism, but you can do it with startups where people pulled your technology from you. And I just thought that was a great thing I wanted to scale.
Were you one of the people who made a great deal of money during the dot-com boom and then lost a great deal in the bust?
We did very well, growth period in the rise. We lost a lot of value in the crash, and then we built it back after that. And one thing that I said to people, because everybody was saying it was incredible what people felt, during the dot-com crash, people said to me, Bill, entrepreneurship is over. You should give up, you should stop, take all your money, distribute it to all the shareholders, and just close up shop. And I said to people, entrepreneurship is not over. The value every day of the internet is going up. The utility is going up. The number of users is going up. The capabilities are going up. So that's going up and to the right. The valuations might take a momentary dip, but I was exactly right in that it would fully come back and people would catch up to that constant improvement of the utility, and sure enough, 3 or 4 years later, that was the case. Things took off like crazy. There was a lull period from 2001 to 2004, but right after that, actually, very interestingly, right when DLD started, right when DLD started in 2005, that's really when things were turning. There was another setback during the recession in 2008, but other than that, it's been up and to the right the whole time.
Thank you, Steffi and Yossi. Maybe all our digital prosperity can be pinned on them.
When you think back to even the title of the conference, DLD, Digital Life Design, digital moved into our lives to impact it in such a great way. Digital is fully integrated in our lives today, the same way I would say electricity is, and the same way I believe AI will be in the next 10 and 20 years. It's not going to be some add-on. Like digital is not some add-on to our life anymore. It's deeply ingrained in everything. In your watch, in your AirPods, in our desktops, in our cars, everywhere. To think about how a car is more digitally connected now than the internal combustion engine ever could have taken it to is just incredible. And that's happening in every industry.
I've been to a number of the DLDs, but I think you're ahead of me on the league table, Bill. You've been to 15. I think you're certainly in the top 3 or 4 people. What is it about DLD that captures then the spirit of innovation and excitement?
I feel that DLD, by bringing together digital's impact on life and the way design integrates with it, exactly in the title, is what's unique. It's not just digital on its own, so it's not just technology, and it's not just daily life on its own, it's the integration of them. Plus, the things that they feature are the issues that will be the dominating ones in the next few years, whether it's censorship, or freedom, or digital expansion, or equality. All the issues that have been talked about at DLD are always the forerunner of the problems coming in the next few years. So it's a really great place for fertile ground for new ideas for what's going to be coming in the near future.
Do you have a DLD anecdote, a personal anecdote, Bill, that somehow captures its spirit?
Well, I have 2. One is I had an idea for a new type of energy storage that would use gravity as opposed to chemicals in batteries. And I had this idea back in 2017. And Steffi invited me to share it on stage. I shared it on stage. That brought a whole bunch of investor enthusiasm that led me to start the company, that led us to build the company, that led the company to go public 2 years ago, and now that company is installing hundreds of megawatt hours of storage all over the world. So that was really, DLD was really instrumental in giving me a launching pad for that new idea. And then just last year, a year ago, almost today, the New York Times sued OpenAI for taking their content into the large language model that they have. And that led me to be thinking about how could there be a more fair way to attribute content creators and fairly compensate content creators in this new age of generative AI. So I went to DLD in January of this year, started talking to Berta and other publishers who were there at the conference, and they all confirmed that there should be a revenue sharing methodology for this, which led me to start the company Pro Rata. So again, DLD had a big impact on that company. That company is taking off like crazy. We just closed a great investment round. We had closed 25 publishing partners around the world. And again, that company was pretty much started right at DLD in January 2024.
Do you mimic Yossi at DLD? Do you basically sit around in the corridors or stand around in the corridors chatting with people, or do you actually attend the speeches?
I attend the speeches. So I get the most by attending speeches. Yossi's incredible, and he's got an incredible comedic flair to him as well, and a great sarcasm too that I worship. I love actually hearing the speakers talk, because when I hear the speakers talk, I hear the problems they're talking about in the world that I think need to be solved with technology. And that really gives me the inspiration. I really love reading everything I can, listening to every talk I can, because that really is where I find the great nuggets for the future.
You're a walking advert for DLD, for behaving oneself rather than misbehaving oneself, actually showing up and listening to what other people say. Bill, of course, another of the wonderful things I think about DLD, relatively unique, is that it brings together European and American entrepreneurs. It's obviously held every year in Munich. Many Germans, many Europeans, Western Europeans, many East Europeans, many Israelis, many friends of Yossi, and of course many Americans like yourself. Over this last 20 years, though, what seems to have happened is a growing disparity in wealth and innovation between not necessarily Europeans, because many of the most innovative Europeans seem to show up in Silicon Valley, but between Europe and the United States. Is that fair? And why has it happened so dramatically over the last 20 years?
I think that the fact that we had 5 companies in California that became trillion-dollar companies because they cornered some markets so successfully led to that disparity. I actually think that disparity is starting to close with the universality of the application of AI. The fact that that's happening in France, that's happening in Germany, that's happening in China, that there's investments all over, and the smart brain power is everywhere. It's almost like a new playing field that has been set forth with this new technology. I think it's going to be leveling, and I hope it's going to be leveling. But of course, we have some trillion-dollar companies right here in California that are going to fight to own that as well. So it's not going to be trivial. They have a lot of power, and they have a lot of capital. But I do think that the exact thing that DLD talks about, by bringing together disparate people from all over the world, really will lead to some of this great new technology happening over there.
There are some Europeans, particularly those associated with the EU, who are proud of the fact that Europe seems to lead or pioneer on the regulation front. In fact, one of my most meaningful connections was built at DLD when I met Margaret Vestager a few years ago. Do you think Europeans and the EU should be proud of that regulatory impulse?
I do think so. I think that the regulatory impulse is going to be even more important with AI. This is something that is much more dangerous than the prior technologies and much more upside opportunity than the prior technologies. So I think that if the EU can be smart about leading with that regulatory framework, that will be copied elsewhere. A lot of the regulatory framework that the EU put together for security and safety protections was copied elsewhere. I think that they need to move quickly. I think that there's urgency to do this now so that the rest of the world can copy. And I hope that the United States can copy what the EU does in that area.
One of the concerns also about Europe, and you know this better than most as both an investor and a startup entrepreneur, is the disparities in capital between the United States and Europe. Has this grown over the last 20 years? It seems as if the US at the moment, particularly when it comes to investment in AI, is awash in capital, whereas in Europe there's always an increasing scarcity of investment capital.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a challenge. One thing that has been helping that, there's been a lot of capital coming in from the Middle East and China, And that capital from the Middle East is investing in AI heavily, and that might help us. Keep going, or yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. The capital coming in from the Middle East is definitely going to have an impact, and that's going into Europe in a big way. I actually think a bigger difference than the capital difference is the mentality that risk is okay, and that failure is acceptable, and that failure with learning is not a scarlet letter, it's a bonus. So I definitely think, in the United States in general, and in California in particular, if you have a startup that didn't succeed, and you learn from it, backers want to back you almost even more. Whereas that attitude is a little different in Europe. So people are much more scared to take a chance because of the outcomes that might lead to a negative future for them. And I feel that that cultural thing needs to change maybe more than the capital difference to help them catch up or exceed what's happening here in the United States.
As Reid Hoffman so famously says, fail fast and fail often, which, Bill, you've done as well, but it also
Definitely.
means that you've succeeded sometimes fast and
We
succeeded
have,
often.
I have 150 companies that we started over the last 28 years. 150 companies. It's almost one a month. At the beginning, slower now because we're taking more care in each company we started just because of the time involved in investing in each of these new ideas. But I've had 60 failures. 60 times we had a great idea that we were so excited about that didn't work out. And I've learned so much from those 60 failures. That helps us succeed so much better on each new company we start. Our batting average has only gotten better and better with each company we've done. And my ability to help other entrepreneurs because of those 60 failures is way better than one success or even 10 successes, because the lessons learned from those are so valuable. And if more people understood that those lessons learned, if you could have the humility to fail and accept it and understand why and be honest with the reasons why you failed, it's so valuable for the future success.
What's the most painful failure you've had in the last 20 years?
I had a failure where we started a company called Aptera. It was an electric car company. I wanted to make, around the time that Tesla was being formed, a super efficient, streamlined vehicle that could run very, very far on low amount of battery power because batteries were very expensive back in the early 2000s. And we raised the initial money. I actually got the Google founders to invest in the company. I think we raised $10 million from them, $20 million overall, built a beautiful prototype, took 4,000 pre-orders for the car at $25,000. It was a beautiful vehicle. We had 4 models of the car, and it was incredible. But then the recession hit, and we couldn't raise additional capital in 2008. We didn't have the money we needed to build a factory. To build the 4,000, we had to return the deposits on the vehicles and close down the company. And that was just sad because my heart was so in it. We were so close to succeeding, but some other externality in the world failed that had nothing to do with us, a financial crisis, and that dried up all the capital to build the factory we were so close to building. So that was a painful one. I don't know if that's the most painful one, but it's one that comes to mind, that we were so close we could taste it. And even having $100 million in pre-orders for the vehicle, but we weren't able to fulfill them, so that was very sad.
One of the things, Bill, we've done a number of these conversations with prominent DLDers like yourself. One of the things that we've talked about is that over the last 20 years, there has been, it would seem at least, a shift in the zeitgeist about technology. In 2005, in spite of the dot-com boom, most people were still optimistic that tech could make the world a better place. Now there's more and more skepticism and hostility, particularly towards those multi-trillion-dollar companies that you note are mostly based in California. Why is that? Is that fair, and why has it happened?
I think it is fair. I think it's fair because I think that those companies are public companies. They're profit-driven, and they've often made decisions that are anti-consumer and pro-profit. And when those companies have $1 trillion in revenue and billions in profit, and they can turn up the dial on the profits a little bit at the expense of the customer experience, that does sour people in the technology. And I feel that there should be some balance. I think that will hurt them in the long run because eventually consumers will move to things that don't hurt them that way. But in the short term maybe even being 5 or 10 years, it's very, very profitable and it rewards shareholders. So I think that people having a negative view of technology is valid. I also think that every technology can do both good and harm. And it's the goal of a company and a government and a society to balance those two. And I think some of these technology companies have had a runaway success by not balancing the harm against the profit. And that has led to a view that these companies are so profit-driven, they're not interested in my own personal data or whatever the other criteria you might place on that. So I agree that it might have swayed too far in the other direction, and I think there should be some sway back. There's a lot of regulatory movement in the U.S. to possibly break up some companies that have gotten too large or too monopolistic. That might end with the new administration, I'm not sure. But I definitely think...
Would you like to see some of those companies broken up?
I think some of them should be. I think some of them...
Well, any in particular?
I think
there aren't that many.
Yeah. Well, I think that the companies that do tying of one product where they have monopoly to another product, that harms competitors, that harms competition, and they should be separated. It shouldn't be that they should be stopped. They just should be distinguishable entities that have to compete on their own merits.
So you're sympathetic to the Justice Department's intent, at least in
I'm
theory,
sympathetic to the intent.
on taking Chrome, for example, out of Google.
Yes, I'm sympathetic to the intent for sure. The instrument by which to achieve it is complex, and I wouldn't be the one I wouldn't want to be the one who has to decide exactly how you splice and dice these things. But I do feel that things have gone too far in favor of profits for the large tech companies.
Was there a problem, Bill, in a more fundamental structural sense with the business model of a lot of these Web 2 companies, like Facebook and Google in particular? You were one of the pioneers of advertising in Web 1. These companies, especially Google and Facebook, they're advertising companies. They figured out a way to give their products out for free and then sell huge amounts of advertising around data. Some people have called this surveillance capitalism. Is the model flawed, or is it its application that's problematic?
I think it's the application that's problematic. I'll give you an example. When we first invented GoTo.com, which was the pay-per-click advertising company back in 1998, it was intended to give more fair access to small advertisers, to the long tail of advertisers and businesses, to get access to customers. Customers benefited because they could find relevant content to what they were looking to purchase. Advertisers benefited because they could target them more precisely. That all makes sense, and that's a strong benefit. And that benefit still exists today in all of these companies you're talking about. However, when you then decide that the way to get more advertising revenues is to have more engagement, and the way to have more engagement is to have more hate or more agony, and that's what drives more impressions, the advertising is still fine, but it's the method by which you're driving up the impressions that's bad, and that's where I think it's distinct. It's the fact that the company's made a decision, hey, I'm willing to do the bad thing to get the more impressions, to get the more advertising revenue. It's not the flaw of the advertising revenue. So that's an example of where I think the model is not the problem, it's the application of it.
Bill, you've got 3 kids, they all grew up in this age.
Five kids.
5 kids.
Yeah.
Two late editions. You've got 5 kids, so you know you're all too familiar with kids and technology. Some countries have decided that they need to regulate how children interact or access technology. The Australians, for example, are looking at regulating kids' use of cell phones. Over the last 20 years, has technology, particularly when it comes to kids, become too ubiquitous? It's the age of anxiety, an age of narcissism, an age of social media. Do you feel that, again, we can't necessarily blame the companies, they're just in the business of distributing their products, but is technology too dominant, particularly for young people?
Well, again, I think it's not the technology's problem, it's the application of technology. And again, I'll give the example. I think social media can be fantastic for children. It's only if you change the algorithm to cause the children to go down bad rabbit holes, because that causes more engagement. That is the bad part. So I think there's more responsibility needed from the technology companies to apply the technology in the proper way. By leading people in a bad direction with a YouTube video or with a social media platform, or to cause body anxiety or other anxiety, those platforms cause more addiction by doing that. And they're doing that because it keeps people engaged. I think it's the engagement problem, not the application problem. So I think that those tools, again, can be so valuable. I think my own children grew up in a time when the algorithms weren't quite so negative in that area, and I didn't have problems with them. They understood how to balance their technology use with the rest of their life. And I've read so much recently about how bad the problem has gotten for young teenagers today, and for even younger than teenagers today. and I read Jonathan's book and all about the anxiety. I didn't see that in my own children growing up, and that's why I think it's the algorithmic change that is more the problem, not the fundamental technology.
So yeah, the Haidt book, the John Haidt book has done very well. Bill, a couple of the people we've done in this series we featured before, Stephen Levy and John Markoff, two perhaps the most distinguished tech journalists. They both knew Steve Jobs very well. One of the things that came out of Walter Isaacson's book about Jobs, Isaacson was on a few years ago talking about his Jobs book, was that while Jobs was creating the iPhone, he policed his own kids very carefully. They weren't allowed the iPhones and the iPads at home. You're not Steve Jobs, but were you, as your kids were growing up, were you a bit of a policeman?
No, I wasn't. So when my kids were growing up, they had the iPad the second it came out, and I think it expanded their minds greatly. I remember my youngest child playing with a pottery application on the iPad that was just brilliant for enhancing creativity and imagination, and I just felt that those tools only increased their appreciation of knowledge and caused more aha moments to go on in their brain that made them the great people that they are today. So I didn't feel that, but again, every parent is different. I just had great success by using those tools in service to help them be better citizens.
So the gross dining table at night is full of people looking each other in the eye and talking rather than staring down at their phones?
Definitely. No phones at the table, but we never restricted our kids' access to technology as they were growing up, and they loved it, and I think they're better because of it.
You may be a model, Bill. Maybe you should put it in a bottle and sell it. So the Web 2.0 age seems to have ended. There was some talk of Web 3, although a lot of it seemed rather vague. Do you have some thoughts about Web 3 and crypto and decentralized companies? Or is it really just was that, or is it a footnote to Web 2?
I don't think it's a footnote. I don't think it had as much impact as Web 2. It might still. But I think that as Web 3 was growing and waning and growing and waning, AI came into the picture and was just dominating the discussion and dominating the world. AI is the most disruptive thing I've ever seen in my lifetime. If I think back to all the things that I saw growing up, where I looked at it and said, the world is going to be different from this on. When I first saw my first PC, when I graduated from college, when I first saw the first internet browser, of course, the mobile revolution. But when I saw ChatGPT in November of 2022, I said, nothing's going to be the same. This is just so dramatic. Like we jumped past the Turing test on one level in one fell swoop, something that people have been talking about for 50 years. And then all of a sudden, on November of 2022, it just happened. And look what's happened since then. And I feel that with AI, it's so disruptive. Think of all the different things that disruptions can do. If you think back in the Industrial Revolution, you had the loom, which automated what someone could do before. So now all of a sudden, you could make a blanket or knit fabric that a person could do. The person was just replaced entirely. Or you think of other technologies like the slide rule, where that enhanced a person's skill. Now they can compute faster. Or take the crane, a crane that could now lift things that no human could ever lift before. Now you can do things that are even superhuman and build buildings that no human could build before. Well, AI is going to do all three of those things. It's going to be a loom and a slide rule and a crane in different applications. So all of a sudden you have the technology that touches everything and will be, I believe, like electricity, which is it will be embedded in everything. It won't be like there's no product in this room that doesn't use electricity in some way. There's no company that doesn't use electricity, just like there's no company that doesn't use the internet. There'll be no company or business of any kind that doesn't have AI in it somewhere. So I feel that that supersedes Web 3.0, or maybe is what Web 3.0 is. I mean, it's not, because Web 3.0 stands for decentralization and blockchain, but I think if anything, it's 4.0, it's 10.0, it's a whole new thing that's beyond that. And I think that's consuming a lot of the resources in the world right now. A lot of the brain power is racing to it. Look what's happened to NVIDIA. It became the most valuable company on the planet in a year. It gained 2.5 trillion of value in a year. Like, it's just, how could that happen? It's because of how big this opportunity really is, and it's going to be transformative. And it already has been.
It's a remarkable moment, Bill, on so many levels, and it seems as if everyone missed it. I mean, Sam Altman didn't, and the OpenAI guys didn't, but even the people who invented really the ideas of ChatGPT, the Google people, didn't develop it. the transformer technology, which had been built within Google, then became an OpenAI product.
Yeah.
People have always talked about OpenAI.
Yeah.
From the 80s onwards. Markov talked about
Yeah.
this, Levy talked about this. I'm guessing for you as an investor and as a startup entrepreneur, you're always dabbling with AI. How did you feel when you suddenly saw this ChatGPT product that was all your dreams?
Yeah. No, my mind was blown. And think about what you just said. Google invents this transformer architecture, and they look at it and they go, this is pretty cool. They write a paper on it, they publish it. OpenAI is formed by Altman and Elon and Reid Hoffman, and then it still takes, from 2017 to 2022, it takes another 5 years of incremental development, scaling it bigger, throwing money at it, throwing chips at it, till it finally reaches that turning point where people say, holy shit, look at this, look at what this can do. So it took a lot of vision to take it from a paper to a reality. And I didn't call it, I didn't predict it, I would not have bet on that, I would not have put that much money on it. I didn't see that outcome happening. And because they formed that company to take that chance, it showed the world that that was possible. And then it woke up everybody, and everybody said, oh my God, like, it's alive, look at what this is. And now everybody is figuring out now how to build applications on top of that core technology. So you have a core technology that blows people away. Yes, it can make a great poem or some lyrics or do this, that's incredible. But now how do you put that to utility and improve people's lives? And now people are putting that to work in many, many areas. And it's going to be put to work all over. It's going to really affect productivity in a big way.
And it speaks to what you were saying earlier about the need to take gambles and to be willing to fail, because it's conceivable that they put all that time and money into the development of the transformer technology, and they would have hit a wall.
Yeah, and if you had looked at it in 2020 and 2021, you would have said it failed. And then all of a sudden, like everything's a failure right until it turns over and becomes a breakthrough. Like and you have to really be persistent to bet on things like that and wait till they come true. And that was a gamble. That was an incredible one. Really, really incredible. A world-changing one.
And of course, I don't remember the exact cliche, but success has many parents, failure has none. You're not an OpenAI guy, but you're a real tech insider, Bill. You see a lot.
Oh, there were 1,000 parents to that.
But was it Altman? Was it Ilya and some of the other founding scientists? Who really should be given the credit? Jeffrey Hinton? Yeah,
well, Hinton and others were just given the credit in the form of the Nobel Prize. Many, many people over the years talked about neural networks and scaling them. I think that a lot of credit should be given to the people who risked the capital, who said, let's go, and their lives, the time of their lives. I mean, the opportunity cost of spending years working on this, not knowing if it will work, but having a belief. That's incredible. So I think equal credit has to go to the people who invented the core technology and to the people who were persistent with it. And persistence was a big factor in making this work.
And maybe in an odd way, it's actually a model for non-profit business model. And not that it's a business model, but the non-profit architecture, because had it been a for-profit company, OpenAI, they may not have been willing to take such a sharp gamble.
Yeah, and the people who started it were worried about the future of AI and wanted to make it safe. And they were willing to work on the technology for a while to find out what the problems would be to work on that. Now, some of that's been lost now that it's actually morphing into a for-profit company. And they have to be able to pay the bills because it's very expensive to do what they're doing. To build foundational models costs a fortune, and to make them better and better. Now, an example of another bet that's going on right now that we don't know the answer to is some people say that just throwing more horsepower at it and throwing more words at it will make it eventually have perfect reasoning. Some people say that's a dead end, and you need to come up with a new model to make the next frontier leap. And the answer is not yet known. And we'll probably know it in a year or 5 years. We'll know sometime between now and 2030 which one of those ideas wins out, or both, or neither. And that's an example of, until you do the work, you won't know the answer. And it's great that people are willing to take the risk.
They take the risk, but for some it's an existential risk, not just a corporate existential risk, but a species one. Does AGI worry you? I mean, the perfect outcome of that is AGI, where we ourselves perhaps become footnotes, and as some people have suggested, AI might be, as a species, our final invention.
It could be. I definitely am worried about it. I definitely think about that for my children, who will grow up in 2050, when we probably will have that. And I hope that societies come up with ways to manage that for the benefit of all of humanity. And I definitely think that is going to be a challenge. Because look at how difficult it is to manage things like climate change, how difficult it is to manage things like regulating social media companies, which cause a lot of harm, and a lot of greatness, but a lot of harm. So I am worried that we'll be able to come up with the wisdom to be able to handle something which is so powerful as this. This definitely dwarfs everything else we've done, except maybe nuclear weapons, which we did succeed in managing, but doesn't look like there's the urgency being placed on this one, as was on nuclear weapons.
You talk about something, Bill, called wisdom, but you suggested earlier that AI reduces the creation of knowledge to zero. Does that include wisdom?
I haven't seen it produce wisdom yet, but people are already showing AI making new science, making new discoveries. I definitely think that wisdom might be in that set. I haven't seen it yet, but I wouldn't want to say no. I wouldn't want to say never. And with AGI, maybe AGI, the criteria is wisdom, or new invention, or novel new creations. But I definitely think that we're in for quite a new show in the next 20 years compared to even the last 20.
Do you think, Bill, AGI or AI can become wise enough and selfless enough to shut itself down, to say, enough is enough, we've reached the end of the road. If you want a future, humanity as a species, then we need to end our narrative?
Well, that would be great. I think that that will only happen if the incentives are set properly in the structure of the system, just like we have incentives in our structure to stay alive long enough to procreate. As long as the incentives are set right in the structure, and that's where maybe the regulation comes in, or maybe that's where the altruism comes in from the creators to make that be a possibility. But I sure hope that's the case. I'm not optimistic. I'll be cautiously optimistic, but I'm not wildly optimistic that that will be the case.
When Bill Gross isn't optimistic, I think we should all be worried. Bill, another of my friends who've been in this series, Douglas Rushkoff, is a big admirer of DLD, argued, saw him last week in New York, that AI is the first, and I'm quoting him here, it's a fascinating observation, it's intriguing. He described it as the first native app of the internet. I'm not entirely sure what he means.
The first native app. Yeah,
but it has a ring of truth about it, doesn't it?
Really interesting. It is an unbelievable thing. When you have the ability to summon, I wouldn't say all of human knowledge, but a pretty big subset of human knowledge, both from books, from articles, from the web, from the internet, from things that have been put into these foundational models. And you can summon them and ask for any part of that and get back a natural language answer instantly. It sure feels like something that's pretty native. It sure feels incredible.
What becomes of you and I? You as an investor, startup entrepreneur, me as a broadcaster and writer? Do we have a future?
Oh, absolutely. Now, here's why I think that's given. No matter what happens, there will always be problems in the world that need to be solved. And that's where the technology solutions come in to make the world a better place. And no matter what happens, there will always be things that need to be explained to others to help organize society. And that's where you come in. So there's no risk for our place in society being valued. It just will change. It will change the way we deliver it. It will change the way we think about it. But we will need these things as long as there's humanity alive.
You mentioned climate. You're very much involved in climate technology. As you said earlier, you had one of the first EV startups. How important can AI be in terms of solving what seems to be at least the central and most challenging problem with the world in the 2020s, the climate crisis?
I think AI can help there a lot. So already AI is being used to optimize efficiency, make generators, make transmission run more efficiently, to take advantage of our resources and save energy by just operating everything more cleverly. But I think AI will invent new things, new chemicals, new foundations, new battery technology, new energy storage. It'll help drive down the price of renewable energy in many, many ways. So I think AI is going to be required to do that. I definitely think that AI is a tool, a la the crane, a la the table saw, that just gives humans a mechanical advantage over solving problems. I think it's going to be very important in solving climate change.
Are the native AI companies going to dominate the next 20 years of corporate life? OpenAI is an example. Google's trying to reinvent itself as Microsoft did 20 years ago. Microsoft now, I think, is the most valuable company in the world, so it's clung on to power. There's been talk that Demis Hassabis at DeepMind might eventually become CEO of Google. Are the big players in 20 years, Bill, going to remain the big players when you and I have this conversation in 2045? Are we still going to be talking about Google and OpenAI and Microsoft?
I think some of those companies will be around for sure, but I don't think that only the AI foundational model companies will dominate. I think that there'll be a handful of foundational model companies that can afford to spend $1 billion to build a model, that take in all the content and build these either reasoning or other textual-based models. But I think that the number of applications that you need to build on top of that to actually have an impact on society's life, that will be 1,000 companies. There will be so many individual areas. And think about life is composed of so many different things. You're buying cars, you're doing taxes, you're governing. There's so many different applications that need to have specialized AI layers built on top of foundational models. So it won't be that those companies dominate. It will be those companies will be big, they'll be powerful, but they won't dominate everything because they can't do everything. There's just too many different applications, too many different application areas to cover.
In other words, they can't own the entire stack, and
Yes,
there may never be another .com boom or a Web 2.0 style boom, but there will eventually be a boom of AI companies that don't need the billions of dollars of capital to launch companies like Anthropic and OpenAI.
Yes, I think that there'll be companies that use Anthropic and OpenAI like they are to build very, very important companies. And they will license their technology or pay them for their API use, but they'll build something of value to a specialized customer on top of that. And that will make a huge, huge opportunity for thousands of companies.
Bill, this has all happened so dramatically, with so much impact, that going to DLD in January next year in 2025, it'll almost be like being in the future.
It really is. I've never seen anything move so fast. I remember in the PC days, because I've been through these revolutions, in the PC days, when the PC came out, there was a PC magazine that would come out every 2 weeks. It was like a yellow pages of thickness of ads from all the companies. And every 2 weeks you would open it up and you would read what new products came out to make the PC better. New memory cards, new enhancements. Oh, the hard disk just came out. Like new things would happen on a 2-week basis. Not every issue would have only all new things, but it was really exciting. And then the .com era, maybe every 2 days, you hear about some exciting new .com company that would do something new. I would say now it's every 2 minutes, at maximum every 2 hours, but every 2 minutes you hear about some incredible new AI thing. If you just scroll down a feed of new things happening in the AI space that are pretty significant, revolutionary, it's definitely on an hourly basis, down from a daily basis, down from a weekly basis. So the rate of change in just this past year in 2024, unbelievable. So yes, going to DLD 2025 is going to be quite exciting.
We know about Moore's law. Maybe we should talk about Gross's law, going down from 2 weeks to 2 days to 2 hours to 2 minutes, and then in 2045, Bill, if you and I have the good fortune to still be around,
just changing in real time.
Are we talking about 2 seconds? I mean, at what point, it's like with Moore's law, at what point does it hit a wall?
Yeah, it's going to only hit a wall at the pace of the rate our brain can take it in. It's going to be so fast. Already, we're approaching that, but it really, really is incredible. Definitely, our evolutionary cycles are way slower than the evolutionary cycles of technology. Evolutionary cycles of our bodies are way, way, way slower by thousands of years, millions of years. So it's going to be hard for us to keep up with that rate of change. And in fact, I think that difficulty of keeping up with rate of change is showing up in elections and in people's nervousness around the world. I definitely think that there's a big factor of technology impacting the way people view the future.
And finally, Bill, doesn't that mean that the likelihood in the 2040s of us having augmented brains, of having chips in our heads or our ears or our feet, isn't that pretty likely?
I think that is pretty likely. Think about the augmentation cycle. The augmentation cycle went from us having to go to the library, to having the internet, to having Google, to having our phone in our pocket, to having our watch, to having our AirPods, to soon having our glasses, and then maybe all the way, as you said, to implants. So it will be the world's knowledge on demand to our brain. And then it's, what do we do with that? Well, how do we take that to make society better? How do we take that to make more equity and fairness? It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be exciting.
It's going to be more than challenging, and Bill Gross, you get it as well as anyone. Thank you so much. You are one of DLD's most important contributors and fans, and we will see you in Munich in January. Maybe we'll do another interview then, but we will certainly do interviews in the meantime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.